Hello and welcome again to Tech It Out. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most common causes of graphics card failure, that of overheating. One of the main contributing factors to overheating, of course, is dirty fans and dirty vents. And this, of course, does cause great problems, but there are other reasons as well, other contributory factors that could lead to your card overheating. So we're going to be looking at my Radeon R270X. This is the DirectCU version. And as you can see, it's still in very good condition. It is still working. It is starting to overheat a little bit. But the reason I'm using this one first is because I upgraded to the R290X, which is very similar to the R390X. The R290X actually comes out of the factory running at 95 degrees centigrade. That's the set limit. And it does get very hot, so I'm hoping to do the same job on that one to try and bring down the temperatures a little bit. This card, as you can see, doesn't exhaust into the atmosphere outside the PC. It exhausts inside. The air gets blown by the fans down over the fins and the heat pipes here, top and bottom, and that takes the heat away. What does tend to happen is that not only do the fins get full of dust, which I always try to keep clear, but there are other things underneath that we need to look at, especially after the card gets to about a year or so old. Things can start going wrong quite quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this card, strip it down and refurbish it. Now there are 3 screws here which we need to take out first. On many cards you'll have a lot more screws. The shroud on the outside, the plastic shroud, will be held on as well by extra screws. This card though doesn't have those screws. The shroud is actually held on to the heatsink itself. We're going to start the disassembly. And as you can see, the screws for the shroud are 2 at the top here. There's one and one this side. Then the other 2 are tucked away in the bottom underneath, and you can't really get to them at all. You have to take the heat sink off completely first before you can get to them to remove them, so you can clean the fins. Just go and find the right bit for the job. I think I'll actually change to a slightly different one, a different size, because that was a little loose. And we take out the 3 screws. Now, as I said, on many other cards you'll find that there are a lot more screws to take out. They actually go into the shroud as well as into the heatsink. These screws, I'll just take this one again to show you, have little spring washers on them. This is so you don't have to over tighten them. It just pulls the heatsink down onto the GPU itself, just the same as with your CPU heatsink. If you do decide to do something like this with your card, do take great care. If it doesn't come apart, don't force it. There may be a screw tucked away somewhere. Sometimes the back panel has screws on it. The little screws on the back themselves may be holding it in. So take a good look at where all the screws are that secure it. You may need to wiggle a little bit, but if it takes more than just slight pressure, be very careful and check and double check to see if you've got everything unscrewed. As you can see, I'm just wiggling this and it's not coming off, so there must be something else. So we'll have a look, and there's a little white dot there, which is a safety sticker by the looks of it. The type you get that says warranty is void if this is damaged, so we'll just damage it as this is well out of warranty. And then we should just be able to lift the PCB off the heatsink. Now again, take great care at this point as you lift it, as there will be a wire connecting the PCB to the fan of the heatsink. As you can see, it's on the end of the card here on this one. So we'll just unplug that Again, taking great care not to damage anything. The heatsink is off, and you can see the remaining thermal paste there and the gap that's left also. And this here is a thermal pad. It's a sticky pad which covers some of the memory and takes some of the heat away from the memory. It's only on the top part of the card and not on the sides, which is very odd. I suppose the second fan actually helps to cool those through the fins. We're going to look at the GPU itself first. You can see the various parts of the card, the memory modules that I mentioned, and the caps on the side. All these parts get very hot during the card's use, especially when it's under strain. To help clean this card, I'm going to use one of these. It's a little cleaning pad or cloth. It's alcohol that doesn't leave a residue. We're going to be using this to clean off what's left of the old compound on the card. We just gently rub, and as you can see as I'm doing it, although some is coming off, it's very, very dry and brittle, which of course means it's not going to be much use anyway, because it's not going to conduct any heat in this condition. I'm just going to use a bit of paper towel here, starting off, to get rid of the dry flakes, especially those that have gone down over the edge of the GPU. There seems to be a lot of heatsink paste used on this GPU, because usually when you take them off you find there's very little paste anywhere. The compound is used very sparingly. I suppose to save money, but they've gone overboard on this one. They put a lot on there. I'm getting most of it off, but there's quite a bit still stuck in between the little components, the surface mount components on the board. And I can't quite get at those with this piece of paper towel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little brush. Now this brush is a brush from a shaving set. When you have an electric shaver, it's used to clean out the inside of the shaver. And the bristles are not too coarse, but they're not too soft either, so they're just about right for this. You don't want to go damaging any of the surface mount chips and ICs, but at the same time you want to get all that dried on paste off there. Just to clean off the residue, the rest of the residue. As you can see, the chip is now looking a lot cleaner. It's reflecting. It's almost mirror-like. So we take the pad, and again, very gently, there's another little bit there that I've missed. And clean off the tape a little. And very gently we just wipe off what looks like an almost perfectly clean GPU anyway. We'll wipe off the caps and the memory modules at the same time. Quite a lot of muck still on there that's come off. So that's the PCB side done. Next we're going to turn our attention to the heatsink itself. So we'll just leave that out of the way and bring the heatsink down. And we repeat the same thing with the heatsink. Now we don't have to be quite so gentle with the heatsink, but still we don't want to go damaging the face of the heatsink in any way. We don't want to scratch it with any deep scratches, because again that will cause difficulty when we come to reseating with the new paste. So we're just going to scrape off the old flakes again here, the dried on stuff, and I'm just using the edge of the metal pocket that the pad came in. And then some tissue paper again, just to try and clear off the rest of it. You can see just how dry and dried on this old paste is now. But it's starting to come off now. We're starting to see the copper again. Because there are slight lines etched into the copper here, we're not going to get every single bit off, but we get as much as we can. We use the brush again to get into the little crevices between the heat pipes. Already it's looking a lot better than it was. See just how much muck is coming off this. Using the cleaning pad to clean off any more residue that will be on there. Quite a lot still on there. Turn the pad over and use a clean side. There's even more residue from the compound there coming off. So now we're going to take this sticky pad off. So it's just like the heatsink compound that you use. It will take the heat away from the components into the heatsink itself and keep them cool. The compound doesn't go all over the PCB, just as you saw it went all over the GPU. Keeps it in place and actually has a softer touch pressing on the more delicate memory modules. Clean off the residue from where the pad was. Just to make sure there's no stickiness left. Now we're just going to line it up because I want to see exactly where each part of the components meet with the heatsink. Now I know that the top line of memory modules on the GPU, of course, both meet with the heatsink, but I'm not sure about the caps and the other set of memory modules, so I'm just going to have a look to see if they actually do line up and touch anything, because there was nothing between them and the heatsink. There was no way of transferring the heat from the second lot of memory modules or the caps into the heatsink, so I suppose they just cooled by the ventilation caused by the fans as they blow through the vent slats. But what I think I will do is I will put some heat pads on where the caps are and where the memory is to try and assist in taking that heat away as well. So rather than just having air cooling, we'll have active cooling through the heatsink. To do this we need some new pad, and the pad comes in these squares. Do be careful because of course this does come in different widths as well. Got 1mm here and 0.75, so I'm just going to check with the 1mm to see if it's the same width as the sticky pad, and it is. So the next thing we're going to do, I'll just clear the top a little bit. is we're going to line up the new pad with the old one. I'll just peel this plastic back a moment so it's easier to peel when I come to actually removing it. Then I'm going to lay the old sticky pad on top of the new one so that it's the same size to fit in the same place. So nothing gets wasted, and of course nothing is where it shouldn't be. Just make sure it's lined up as best I can. And then I'm going to use a very intricate tool, a very special tool, very expensive of course, a pizza cutter. And this is ideal for cutting this. It's much better than trying to use scissors or a knife, because it actually presses down and cuts all the way through in a nice straight line. Straightish line, as best as I can do anyway, without causing too much mess. Now as you can see, it hasn't gone all the way, so all I've got to do is line up again and just give it a little further roll. Then peel back the top layer of plastic gently again, because I don't want to stretch it, and then just lay it exactly where the old heatsink was, and it is adhesive as well, so it sticks in place. So that will now match up with the top memory modules. So next we're going to remove these two felt pads. They're not actually touching anything, or if they are, they're very lightly touching, but they're not conducting any heat at all away from the memory modules or the caps on either side. So as you can see there, they just seem to be there. I don't know, perhaps they're for vibration so that the heatsink doesn't vibrate against the caps. But I'm going to replace these with some strips which I'm going to cut off this heat pad. And it'll have the same dampening effect because it's quite a soft compound, but it'll also have the added benefit of taking some of the heat away from both the memory modules and those caps, so hopefully it will help it cool better. And we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the green. We lay the felt pad on the top, and it is a little sticky, which is handy because it'll stick in place and stay where I put it, hopefully. And then take the extraordinarily expensive tool again, the pizza cutter, and do the same thing. This time though, I'm going to cut out 4 strips, because this felt pad is about 1.5mm thick, and of course the pad that I'm using is only 1mm, and as it will compress, it is soft, it will actually compress into the slats of the heatsink. There's no problem here, so it's not going to put any undue pressure on the memory modules or the caps. And as it will go into the slats of the heatsink as well, it will no doubt spread out a bit further, give a greater surface area, and then because of that give better cooling again. The greater the surface area, of course, that you can get in contact with the heatsink, the better the conduction of the heat, and therefore the better the cooling. So we just peel off one at a time. And put them in the place where the caps are on the PCB. There's one done. And do the same, exactly the same the other side. The caps actually sit just below this metal strip on this side. Just going to put it just on the edge of this metal strip. Make sure it's nice and straight and lined up so all the caps are covered. And then again put the second one on to make sure the gap is completely filled. All three pieces are in place now. Now the caps are actively cooled as well by the heatsink as well as by the air from the fans blowing over them. Hopefully this will give it even better cooling. Two strips that I mentioned go both sides there. We use the same compound as I used for my CPU, and this is a non-conductive one, so even if it does spill out over the sides, then it's not going to do any damage, it's not going to cause any short circuits. So I'll put some in the middle, about a small pea size, spread it out and remove any excess as well, so that the GPU is fully covered. Again, I'm just using the piece of foil that came off the cleaning pad packet. Keep going gently, just spreading out the compound till it completely covers the surface. Now it's completely covered. I'm just going to remove a little bit more excess from the edge. Now we have a nice thin layer of heatsink compound on the GPU. So we start the reassembly, and the first thing we do of course is to plug the power supply for the fans back in. You may have noticed I haven't cleaned the fins of this heatsink, and that is because I cleaned it when I took the GPU out of the system, and they are perfectly clean at the moment. Normally I would use the same brush as I showed you earlier, the brush for the shaver that has those longer bristles on one end, and I would clean all through every slat that you can see there, and use a hoover at the same time just to completely remove the dust. I'm going to line up the holes very carefully because we don't want to mess up the compound that we've already put on, or indeed the heat pads. So once we've got that first hole lined up, we put one screw in loosely. Gently lay the card back down and then go to the diagonal corner and put the next screw in. Tighten that slightly as well. Again to the next corner. Always working diagonally. So now we've got the last screw in, we can start tightening them down. And as I said earlier, there are small spring washers on them to help you and make sure you don't over tighten, so you don't have to tighten them down as if you're tightening a bolt that's holding an engine in or something. These are quite delicate bolts, or quite delicate screws. Just pinch them tight a little, nothing much, just a little bit, fingertip tight. And it's all back together again, so we're just going to check now to make sure that everything is in line, meeting up properly. There we have the finished article, completely refurbished. Just give it a little clean over now to get off some of that mess that we made with the old compound when we took it off. When I take the 390X out to refurbish that, I'll be putting this one in. And before I take the 390 out, I'll actually be checking and taking some settings on the 390 so that we can do a before and an after on that one. Again, thank you for watching.